Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's Rabbi Stephen, Rav Shmuel ben Hoshua, I don't even know my name. Rav Shmuel ben Yehoshua, Rashbi in the house, and as you can see, there's a new sheriff in town. Actually, my wife and I go for a long walk. We go for hour and a half walks a couple of times a week, to get some exercise, kind of cross train a little bit. And a guy down the street is works for LAPD and saw us walking. He says, "Hey, I got something for you. See me out with my yarmulke." He brings me this, and apparently this is something that the chaplain of the LAPD gives out kind of as a calling card. So it was kind of neat. I got a little badge up there. So, and as also you can see, good guys do wear black. So anyway, so this week, we start the new book of Bamidbar in the wilderness. In English, it's known as the Book of Numbers. And it's known as the Book of Numbers, and the first Parsha, is also Bamidbar in Numbers, because in this portion, we take a census. God has Moses take a census of all adult males between the ages of 20 years old and 50 years old. And this is ostensibly for military service, so they know how many people they have. And they take the shekels, takes them about a week to count the half shekels that they take. That's the way we take a census. And they come to find out that there are 603,550 males between the ages of 20 and 50 that are suitable for military service. And the rabbis, the sages, say that's very appropriate. That's a very appropriate number because, as it turns out, there are precisely 603,550 letters in the Torah. And the point of it is that without one of those letters, just you don't have a kosher Torah. Without one of those people, we don't have a good fighting force. Everybody, and the other reason too is that God cares about us, so naturally they take censuses every now and then. Anyway, so that's kind of how it opens, and it talks about that. Now, there's a little bit of a controversy. The 600,000 is just the adult males from ages 20 to 50. If you include the kids, the women, the older people, and some of the people that came from Egypt, you've got about over 2 million. Some people say there was 2.5 million people. That's like, what, half of New York or 1/4 of New York City, everybody from 24th Street down. And you can imagine the crowd that's moving through the wilderness, listening to orders and listening to directions, whatever. It would almost seem unmanageable. What about all the people gathering around Mount Sinai? That's quite a crowd. So some people think the word aluf, which, as some of you who speak Hebrew might know, is the word aleph, and it means strength. It comes from the word strength, but it's also the word for thousand. Now, a lot of people think, and Hebrew is more of a conceptual type of language. In English, you say wind. We have the word for wind. It's wind, right? In Hebrew, the word for wind is ruach. It is also the word for spirit. So there's a concept there. The fact that, you've got this force that moves and you can feel it, but you can't see it. You can't really touch it. And such the spirit, it's there, you can feel it, but it's really not corporeal. It's not material. So hence the connection. The word for peace, for example, in Hebrew is shalom. And mishalem also means complete. When you're complete, you're at peace, right? Homostasis, people get a challenge, they get something that changes what they're doing, and people get upset and they're not at peace anymore, and so it's conceptual. So a lot of people feel that the word aluf not just means 1,000, but it really means a lot. It means many. It means a multitude. And some people feel that it really, instead of 1,000, it was like 5 or 6, like a military unit. So, being that case, instead of being 2 million, maybe there was a lot less people marching, through the desert. So that's part of that concept. It talks about going through the wilderness. It also talks about how the tribes were mustered, how they were focused around the tabernacle, for example. And by the way, the Levites were not included in this counting because they didn't do military service. So the Levites were counted separately. And they were the ones that, of course, carried all the various components of the tabernacle. Remember, the tabernacle at this point was portable. It was like a mass unit. So you had one group that carried the curtains and the poles. You had another group, the Kohathites, I believe, that were the ones that carried, the sacred objects like the menorah, and they carried around the altar, this big altar where they did their sacrifices. Then there were also those that carried the pegs and some of the other things, right? So there was three groups of Levites, and the ones with the sacred objects were kind of toward the front, and the other two were kind of the back, interspersed between the various tribes. So one of the interesting concepts here is the tribe of Judah. They were first. And as you had different tribes lining up in the four directions around the middle of the tabernacle, you had a main tribe, and Judah was the main tribe of their group. And Judah went first. Now, tradition has it that since the Judahites led the Israelites, led the march, and the Kohathites were behind them with the sacred objects, the Judahites marched backwards because they didn't want to turn their back on the tabernacle. They felt it would be disrespectful. And interestingly enough, if you go to Saturday morning services, people are called up for an aliyah. They go up the bima, and a bima traditionally has 3 steps to mimic or to be symbolic of the 3 stages that Moses went up to Mount Sinai to receive the 10 Commandments. So people, when they come down, they'll typically walk down backwards. They'll hold on to the banister and they'll walk down backwards because they don't want to point their back toward the Torah. See? So it's kind of a tradition and it's kind of a respectful thing. Now, as we all remember, this Saturday is the beginning of the book of Numbers. The following weekend, we will be observing Shevuot. And we've been counting down from the second day of Pesach, Passover, to the 50 days to Shevuot. And they say that Bamidbar is specifically put in the Hebrew calendar to read that portion to come a week before Shavuot, because after all, one of the observances of Shavuot is that Moses came down with the 10 Commandments. The other observation, of course, is that it's an agricultural holiday. It was the end of the spring harvest, and we're starting to reap the wheat after we've reaped the barley. So this portion is a week before because there's a symbolism that as the Israelites were in Egypt, where they were surrounded by objects and idols and people worshiping in all weird ways, now they're out in the wilderness, which is open. And it's symbolic of the openness of Torah, the fact that we're all, open to learning, and that it's just one God. And instead of being plastered with all these things that you have to worry about, there's just the one God and his, 613 commandments. Now, maybe some people would rather worry about a few idols than, 613 commandments. Who knows? But there it is. So this is going to start, Bamidbar, the Numbers is going to start the adventures in the wilderness. And as kind of an advance, Numbers really kind of, there's a lot of intrigue. It almost reads like a Hollywood script when you see the various rebellions, when you see, the different people that come and try to infiltrate, because after all, if you go with the fact that, it says there was 600,000, there was 2 million people, that's a lot of people. And here you are, a Canaanite or, the Amalekites, right? You see all these people, you start to get worried, like, oh my gosh, they're going to come over and take over land, which they kind of are, and we're going to make it holy. It's a holy land. It's right in the middle of the civilized world, and we need to have some civilization there. So they got worried. They started attacking. They started infiltrating, and we're going to see that as we come through this particular book and the rest of the Torah. And we're about 3/5 of the way through the Torah, and we're coming up into the summer. We're going to come into a few different months. We got the month of Sivan coming in pretty soon. This week, we observe Yom Yerushalayim, the Day of Jerusalem, on Friday. So, a couple of notes that I saved toward the end. First of all, those that tuned in on Friday night, thank you very much. We enjoy doing services for you. And, we hope to be back together soon. We hope, of course, as the virus, starts to abate and there's not worry. We'll all get back together. We have a very special first night back planned when that happens. Also, this Saturday will be a Saturday morning service, 9:30 Pacific time. It'll be about 2 hours. The following Friday will be our next Friday night Shabbat, but it'll also be a Shevuot. We'll also be observing Shevuot. So prior to that, we typically do Yisker, which is an observance. It's kind of a special prayer block that we insert 4 times a year. Shevuot is one of them. We'll do it maybe before we start the Sabbath service. We'll do Shevuot. We'll do Yisker. You can remember all your ancestors or your loved ones that have departed. We'll do that first, and then we'll start the Shabbat. We'll do it in the afternoon since Shavuot is technically Friday and Saturday, Yom Shishi and Shabbat. So we'll do it that way. And that's about it. Send in your questions. If you have questions instead of a sermon for Friday night, what we're going to do is I'm going to answer some questions. Everything you want to know about Judaism. I've got one question I'm thinking of, but you can either send me a link, send me an email rather, send me a text, or go on my website, modernrabbistephen.com. And the third tab is a forum. And one of the questions there, you can click on it and put your question, and we're good to go. Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you Saturday.